So on the front, we're looking at just mean and median to review to make sure we remember everything from the 7th, 8th grade. They both these numbers, the mean and median, were ways to measure the middle or to come up with one number that describes all the numbers that's in the middle. And they just were done in two different ways. The mean was done by averages. Let's get this to work. The mean is just an average. The median was a position middle. So it's like just the middle number. Okay, so it's done by position. Whatever is in the middle number of the list of numbers. Well, not positive, position. Okay. We also went through and saw that I believe here the mean was 72, and that if you scored something below the mean, that would take the overall mean down, and if you scored above the mean, that would bring your mean up, which is very similar to how do you raise your grade in a class, right? You have to score above your mean to raise your grade. If you score below your mean or your average, it lowers your grade. Then on the back, we did a little bit more practice. Okay, just bigger numbers, more numbers, not bigger, but more. And introduce you to a 5-number summary. So it asks you to find several things. Number one, find this 5-number summary. So you found the minimum, the Q1, which I'll go over today, the median, the third quartile, and then the max. Okay, so that's the 5-number summary. And also told you to find the range. So that was another number you had to calculate. And remember, that was just the max minus the min. Okay. And then we also have to find the IQR, which is also a range. It stands for interquartile range. Okay. So yesterday you guys went over this and said, okay, the max is 24, so we said 24. The minimum is 1, so we had 1. So the range is just the max minus the min, so that's 24 minus 1, so that's 23. You found the median. Okay, so you find the two middle numbers. You just cross off one at a time, a high and a low. Of course, these have to be in numerical order from least to greatest or greatest to least. And then if you're left with two numbers, like we are here, you find the average or the middle of those two numbers. So if you needed to use a formula, you can find the average. If you want to just look at, well, what's the middle of 1 and 2, and you can figure that's 1.5, you can do that as well. It's 1.5. Okay? So the part I didn't show you yesterday was the quartiles. So how do you find Q1, Q3, and the IQR? They're all related. Basically, the IQR is the same as the range. So the range uses the min and max. The IQR uses Q1 and Q3. So we're going to find Q1 and Q3 and subtract them, and that'll give us this other range, the IQR, the interquartile range. Okay? Now, the quartiles are just the medians of the first half and the second half. Okay? So this is like the second half because technically these are the bigger numbers. So I'm going to use those numbers and find the median of just those numbers only. And that's going to be the quartile, third quartile. Then I'm going to find the median of just these numbers here, and that's going to be the first quartile. So it's just like finding the median all over again. We already did it once for all the numbers. Now we just split them up into two parts, a high and a low, and find the median again for those numbers. So like here, I could cross those off, those cancel, those cancel, those cancel, and you're left with two numbers. So you find the average or the middle of those two numbers. And you can either do 9 plus 5 divided by 2, but if you can just look at it and say, what's the middle number of 9 and 5, and say it's 7, that's fine as well. And that's going to be the third quartile, because it's the bigger of the two numbers. And then you'd do the same thing here. You'd find the high and the low of these quartiles, or this data right here, right? And technically we don't really have to do this, because if they're all the same number, the median's going to be the same as well. So if the two numbers are ever the same, the mean and the median are going to be the same. So that's going to be 1 as well. So because of this, I can now find my IQR, which is just Q3 minus Q1, right? So that's 7 minus 1, which is 6. And that's a completed problem. We found the 5-number summary right here. Call it the 5-num sum. Right? And we got the range, and we got the IQR. So let's do one more where you have to put the numbers in order. So if they're not already given to you in order, make sure you put them in order before you do the quartiles. Let's go down to 10. And look at the LeBron James problem. Okay. And I'm going to do this one least to greatest. You notice the other one was greatest to least. It doesn't matter which order you go in. It's all the same, as long as it's sorted. So the lowest number here would be 20.9. So I'm going to rewrite all these in order. And then 26.8. Oh, 26.7. Yeah. Then 26.8. No, that's a 29. Where's the 26.7?
It's next to the 29.7. To the right.
Ah, there you go. I knew it was there too. There we go. And then what's the next one? 27.1. And 27.2. Another 27.1. Okay, good. And then 27.2. And then 27.3. Okay. And then 28.4. 29.7. 30. Then we have 31.4. 31.4. Okay, so got them all in order. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So the median is going to be the middle number. So we'll have 5 to the left and 5 to the right. Okay, so that middle number is the median. And then I'll use this part to find Q1, right? And I'll use these 5 to find Q3. So you notice how I didn't use 27.2 in finding Q1 and Q3. So there's a difference when there's an even number of data points. Like here, there's even number, right? So the median was 1.5. It wasn't even included in one of these numbers. And then when there's the median is actually included because there's an odd number of problems, then you can find the median in the Q1 and the Q3 pretty quickly. So the middle of the first 5 is 26.8, and the middle of the second 5 is 29.7, and I didn't use the median for either one of those. Okay. So slightly different when you have an odd number or even number, but more or less the same. And then, of course, we have our minimum right here and our max. The fact that the first one is written in 2 rows is really because there's just so many points. There's looks like 18 different points. So once you get like past 15 or 16, it's a good idea to write it in rows like this. It's just easier to look at. But it's not wrong or right. So this one is just written out in one single row. So just play with both ways of doing it and writing it out either way and see which one you like better. But you probably want to get good at using the rows, 2 rows, when you have, like 16 or 18 or 20 different data points. Just easier to keep track of what you use to find the Q1 and Q3. And again, greatest to least or least to greatest, it doesn't matter, okay? Okay, so you guys go ahead and work on the rest of this. Okay, go ahead and find, go ahead and do the rest of these. I'll give you 10, 15 minutes. And then we'll start you on the next one. And what we're going to do today is actually graph these 5 points. So you're just finding the answers right now to these 5 labels. But next is going to be how do you graph that. Okay? And I'll give you a little bit of a minute to catch that up. I just want to go over this one with the times on it. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So I'm going to take the first, leave it as 6. And the second 6. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So you have to, again, the median is easier when you have an odd number because it's just whatever number's in the middle. But then when you go to find the Q1, you have to find the middle of these two, 327 and 331. Now with time, it's a little different. You can't just say it's 3.27. That's not the same thing, right? So it's easier just to say, well, what's the middle of 27 and 31, and come up with 29 and say, okay, it's 329 is the Q1. And then here it's a little bit more difficult, but you can still do it. What's the middle of 55 and 07? Right? So if you come up with it, if you get 401, yeah, plus 6 seconds is 407, minus 6 seconds is 355. But don't put in 3.55 or 4.07. With time, it's not the same as a decimal because time is based on increments of 60, not 100. All right, so you can't have a, 3 minutes and 87 seconds is not 3.87. It just doesn't make sense. Okay, so a little bit different when you have time. Okay, all right, let's look at the work for today. I'll show you how to graph it. Okay. Now, a few things. Make sure, I saw in some papers you did not have this explicitly written out in this order. So for now on, make sure you actually write it out in this exact order, in this exact way. You can do the work in different places, but write it out in that order in the column just like that on your quizzes, test, on everything. Don't change the order. Don't write min, max, and then median. Do it that exact order. Okay. This one's a little bit easier because it's in order already. So min and max, 2 and 20. Let's see here. The median is going to be, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So I'm going to take the first 7 and the second 7. Okay, so that means my median is going to be based on these two. So the middle of 9 and 13 is 11. And then you can do the median of the first half, the first 7. That's just going to be the middle there, which is 7. And the median of these, the middle of these, is going to be 16. Okay, so now there's a reason you want these in order, because when you're graphing them, it's a lot easier when you have everything in the order that it appears from least to greatest. So always have it in this order when you're writing it out. You could just go down on each one of these and just write min, Q1, median in that exact order. That way it's already there. So when you go to graph, it makes a lot more sense. So just make sure it's in this order. It's not necessarily the order you're going to find all the answers. You might find the min first and the max second, but write in that order from least to greatest no matter what. Okay. So up to that point, that is all review from yesterday. So the only thing I'm showing you today is how do you graph this. Okay, so very important, how do you graph this? You're going to use the min and the max, right, to figure out what you should count by here. So count how many squares there are from left to right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So we have 20, and what we need to do is, with those 20 squares, can we fit our range? So the range is going to be 20 minus 2, right? Which is 18. Which means I have enough squares to count by ones to fit 2 through 20. So I can start counting like by 1, or by 2s actually. I'll do that. 2, and then 3, 4. I'm going to go every other when I label it, just so it's not all crowded. And believe it or not, this is probably one of the more difficult parts people have, is figuring out what to count by. So you got to count by the right increment so you can fit everything. So that's step one. Okay, label the axis carefully. Now there's no measurement or labeling on the y-axis, and it doesn't exactly matter where I put things vertically. So as I'm doing this, you might see me graph it down here or up here or in the center. It doesn't make it wrong or right. It also doesn't matter how tall I make this. Okay, so let's go ahead and graph the min and the max. So for these, I'm going to use dots. So I'm going to put a dot at 2, and I'm going to just aim for the middle. There's 2, and then also at 20. Okay? So 2 dots. Now the middle 3 are going to be vertical lines. So I'm going to put a vertical line at 7. So 7's right here. Okay. And I try to make the same amount above and below the dot. So here's the middle, so I went 2 up and 2 down. You could go 3 up, 3 down. Again, how tall it is does not matter. So there's a vertical line at 7, a vertical line at 11, and a vertical line at 16. So a vertical line, find 11. Here's 10, 11. And 16. Okay. So those are the 5 marks from your 5-number summary. Those are the 5 marks you make on the graph. And it's called a box plot because we take those vertical lines and just connect them and make a box. Okay? And also put 2 vertical lines here. So that is a box plot. You put the min here, a Q1 is a line, a median is here, the Q3 is another line, and then the max is here. So you see how when you graph it from least to greatest, that's why you want to write your table from least to greatest, so it's much easier to match up. Now we don't actually graph the ranges. There's 2 ranges, right? The range, and then the IQR, the smaller range. But those are actually, the range would be from the min to the max. So if you measured how far it is from the min to the max, that's the range. And how far is it from Q1 to Q3? That is the IQR, the interquartile range. So we don't actually graph those, but they are on the graph if you want to find them. Now, how do you know if you did it right? So you should be able to hide all the numbers here and hide all these here? And could you get the 5-number summary just by looking at the graph? So could you work backwards and see, okay, the minimum is at 2, and so on. Right? Is the minimum at 2, the max is at 20, and if you could work backwards and get the 5-number summary from the graph, that means you've probably graphed it correctly. The first quartile would be at 7, right? Third at 16, and the median in the middle is at 11. So that's how you know, like, did I get everything on there? Oh, you don't have to actually label it like I did here. You just need to have this part. Okay, just that part only. Okay, so I think that's it. Are we good, or you want to do another? What do you think? Yeah, so number 2 has 3 rows. I'd say rewrite it as 2. So, or you could do a one long single one. It doesn't matter. That's just a matter of style. So the fact like number 1 was a 1 row and this is 3 rows, it doesn't matter. You can rewrite it however you want. That fits how you want to do it. So if you like 2 rows, do 2 rows. If you like 1 long row, you know, if you like the way we did number 1, you can do that. Just play with both ways and see what you like. But it's just a matter of style. It doesn't matter if I gave you, 15 rows. It's still the same process. Least to greatest, and then find your medians, your Q1, median, and Q3, and then your min and your max. Okay? So it doesn't matter. Just play with all the different styles. Okay. So I'll give you a little bit of, we got about 10 minutes. You can finish up the front by the time you leave. One last thing that you're probably noticing on number 2 is that you have to do the scale a little different. So up here, when we looked at the min, the max, it was only 18 apart, and we have 20 squares, so it fits easily. But when you do the min and max here, the min is 75, the max is 100, so that means you have to cover 25, right? But there's only 20 squares. So what you have to do is count by 2s, right? So you might have to count by 2s, like start on 74, and then I'm going to stagger this so it's easier to read. This is 78, this is 80, 82, 84, and so on, and that way you'll be able to fit everything. So I said this, as I mentioned earlier, this is probably one of the more difficult parts of these problems, is just figuring out the scale and how to number your graph so everything fits. So 96, 98, 100, right, is right here, and that's the highest number is 100, so that means we're not going to use any of this part of the graph. We only graph from the low to the high. Okay? So you'll have your min right here, 75, and your max at 100. So you might have to adjust what you count by to make sure all the information, all your data fits on the graph. Okay? And if we're talking about in the hundreds, you might count by 20s or 50s. It just depends how big the numbers are. So just adjust it accordingly to fit your how many squares you have to graph with. Okay? All right. So finish all this up front and back by the time you come to class tomorrow, beginning of class. I'll come around and stamp 47 and 48 at the beginning of class tomorrow.